Mile marker 312 shouldn't exist anymore, but my train slows down every time we pass it. I've run freight through the Appalachian Cut for almost 5 years, and engineers don't scare easily. Steel wheels don't care about ghost stories. Schedules don't bend for superstition. Still, nobody likes the midnight line. Dispatch calls it a coverage gap, 30 miles of mountain where radios fade and GPS drifts. The older engineers call it something else. The quiet stretch. Just keep your speed through there, Walt from dispatch told me before my first run, and don't stop for anything unless you see it on the track. I asked why. He didn't answer. My conductor that night was Eli Mercer, young, procedural, the kind of guy who trusted checklists more than instincts. By mile marker 300, the radio was already dissolving into static. Dead zone? Eli asked. Has to be. But the static sounded crowded, like too many voices trying to talk at once. Fog pooled between the ridges as we climbed higher. No towns, no crossings. Just trees and rock flashing past the headlights. Then we passed mile marker 311. The temperature inside the cab dipped sharply. A second later, the train began to slow. I hadn't touched the brake. You doing that? Eli asked. No. Throttle held steady, brake pressure falling anyway. I grabbed the radio. Dispatch, train 47, static, swallowed the call. Then a thin voice pushed through. Do not open. The signal died. Ahead, the fog thickened until our headlights hit something solid-looking. A straight wooden edge. Posts. Amber lights glowing weakly. A platform. That's not possible, Eli whispered. There's no stop here. But as we crept closer, shapes emerged beneath the lamps. People. Standing in neat rows. Waiting. The train eased to a full stop with a long, metallic sigh. No one waved, no one spoke. They just watched us arrive, like they already knew we would. Then, somewhere behind us, locks released with a soft mechanical click. Eli lunged for the control panel. I didn't hit the doors, he said, panic rising. I believed him, because the indicator light had already turned green, and the doors were beginning to open. Cold air spilled into the train as the doors slid open, carrying the damp smell of wet wood and something older, like a building sealed too long. Eli's hand hovered over the controls. I locked them, he said quietly. Caleb, I know I did. Outside, the passengers began moving toward us. No urgency, no conversation, just slow, deliberate steps in a single file line. The amber lamps above them flickered, revealing details that made my stomach tighten. Their clothes were wrong. Not costumes, just out of time. Heavy wool coats, long skirts, suspenders, polished shoes darkened by moisture. One man wore a brimmed hat you only see in old photographs. Maybe a historical group? Eli offered weakly. At midnight, I said. None of them carried phones, no bags, no visible breath in the cold. The first passenger stepped inside without looking at us. Then another. Their footsteps were nearly silent, leather barely whispering against metal. It felt less like boarding and more like returning somewhere familiar. I leaned forward, trying to read the station sign through the fog. The letters blurred, then sharpened just long enough to make out a single word. Belden. The name tugged at something in my memory, but before I could place it, movement near the front of the line caught my eye. A woman stepped into clearer light. Mid-30s, dark hair tucked beneath a wool cap, coat buttoned high against her throat. Unlike the others, she looked directly at the cab window, directly at me. And she smiled. Not warmly, not cruelly, recognizing. "You're late," she said. Her voice carried through the glass like it had been invited inside. Eli sucked in a breath. "Did you hear?" "Yeah. I've never seen her before," he whispered. "Me neither." Yet the certainty in her expression made it feel like I was the one who'd forgotten something important. The line kept moving until the platform was nearly empty. The woman lingered, letting the others pass her. Then she stepped aboard last. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, the overhead lights inside the car flickered once, twice, and steadied. Behind her, the fog shifted. For a split second, the far end of the platform showed nothing but trees. No road, no parking lot, no sign anyone had built this place recently. Just a station sitting alone in the mountains. The doors sealed shut with a hard pneumatic hiss. Before I could reach the throttle, the radio crackled again. Walt's voice burst through, sharp with confusion. "Train 47, why have you stopped?" Relief hit me so fast it almost hurt. "Unscheduled platform at mile marker 312, I answered. "We've taken on passengers." Silence. Then Walt said very carefully, "There are no stations on that line." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The engine idled beneath my boots while Walt's words settled into the cab like falling ash. "There are no stations on that line." Eli grabbed the radio. "Dispatch, we are looking straight at one. Wooden platform, old lamps. About 24 passengers now on board?" Static answered him. Then Walt again, tighter this time. "Train 47. Confirm your location." "Mile marker 312. Another pause, longer. "That marker was removed in the 70s, Walt said quietly. "You should be passing uninterrupted track." A chill crept up my spine. Behind us, the passengers were taking seats without direction. No overhead bags slamming, no murmured conversations, just the soft rustle of fabric and the occasional creak of worn leather. Too quiet for that many people. "I'm walking back," Eli muttered. "Something's not right. Don't go alone." He nodded once and disappeared down the narrow corridor. The train began moving again before I touched the throttle. Slow at first, then steadily accelerating. I stared at the controls. Throttle, idle. Brake, neutral. Yet we were climbing past 20 miles per hour. The radio popped. "Caleb," Eli whispered, his voice now coming through my handheld. "You need to see these tickets." I stepped out of the cab and met him between the first two cars. He handed me a small stack of stiff paper slips. Not modern printouts. These were thick, slightly yellowed, edges worn soft with age. Handwritten destinations filled each one. Braddock, Harlow, Mercer Hollow. Towns I knew had either shrunk to nothing or vanished entirely. "Look at the dates," Eli said. 1959, 1960, 1961. My mouth went dry. That's not possible. A soft voice spoke behind us. "Excuse me, is this still the last train?" We turned. The smiling woman stood in the aisle, hands folded neatly in front of her coat. Up close, her skin had that same washed-out quality. Not sick, just absent of warmth. I forced my voice steady. "Ma'am, where are you traveling from?" She tilted her head slightly. "Belden Crossing," she said. "Where else would we wait?" The name clicked into place then, an old story I'd heard during training. A factory fire, toxic smoke, an evacuation that came too late. The rail line had been shut down afterward, the entire town condemned. "How long were you waiting?" Eli asked. Her smile deepened, almost sympathetic. "Oh, long enough." A small tug touched my sleeve. I looked down. The child from the platform stared up at me, clutching a stuffed rabbit worn nearly gray. "Are we almost out?" the child asked. "Out of what?" The child pointed toward the window. I followed the gesture and felt my heartbeat stumble. Shapes were moving between the trees. Tall, thin, keeping pace with the train. We were doing 40 now. Nothing should have been able to run beside us out there. I spun back toward the cab. The GPS screen flickered once, twice, then the route line vanished entirely, leaving only a blinking cursor in empty black space. I slid back into the cab and tapped the GPS screen like that might shock it back to life. Nothing. Just a blinking cursor floating in black. No track, no terrain, no coordinates. Like we were moving through a place the system refused to recognize. "Dispatch," I called, forcing calm into my voice. "We've lost positioning. Confirm our signal." Static rolled in, then Walt answered, his voice strained. "Your transponder dropped 2 minutes ago. According to our board, train 47 isn't on the line anymore." "That's not possible. We're still moving." "Caleb," he said carefully, "the last ping we got from you placed the train 3 miles south of where the rails end." The rails end. I looked ahead through the windshield. Steel tracks still gleamed under the headlights, stretching forward into fog. Behind me, a seat creaked. The smiling woman had stepped into the cab doorway. "You found it," she said softly. "Found what?" "The way through." Eli stiffened beside me. "Ma'am, you need to return to your seat." She ignored him, eyes fixed on the dark beyond the glass. "Most trains don't stop anymore," she continued. "Not since the closure." "What closure?" I asked, though I already knew. "After the fire," she said simply. The memory surfaced fully now. Belden Crossing, 1972. A chemical plant blaze that burned hot enough to warp rail lines. Official reports claimed the evacuation succeeded. Unofficial ones said hundreds were never accounted for. "Evacuation trains were scheduled," the woman went on. "But smoke came faster than expected. People gathered on the platform." Her gaze drifted toward the passenger cars. "And waited." A knot tightened in my chest. "Those trains never arrived." She met my eyes again. "You did." The temperature in the cab dropped another few degrees. I turned back to the windshield and noticed something that hadn't been there moments ago. A signal light ahead, glowing green. We hadn't passed a signal tower in miles. "Dispatch," I said quickly. "Do you show an active signal near our position?" "No," Walt replied. "There hasn't been infrastructure in that sector for decades." Decades. Yet the light burned steady, inviting us forward. As we drew closer, its glow revealed another shape forming out of the fog. A platform, larger than the last. New-looking, but built in the same old style. A wooden sign hung beneath a bright lamp. This time the letters were unmistakable. Belden Crossing, final stop. The brakes engaged on their own. All at once, every passenger behind us stood, not slowly, not uncertainly, in perfect unison. Eli's voice cracked. "Caleb, why are they standing?" I didn't answer, because I was staring at the throttle, still idle. Yet the train was already easing itself to a halt. The train settled to a stop with a long metallic sigh. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the aisle filled with the soft shuffle of passengers stepping forward. No pushing, no confusion. Just quiet patience. The kind you see when people believe they've finally arrived somewhere safe. Eli leaned toward me. Don't open the doors. I'm not touching them. The control panel chimed anyway. Unlocked. A cold pressure built in my ears as the doors slid apart. Fog curled inside immediately, thin and pale, carrying a faint chemical smell, burned plastic and wet ash. The passengers began stepping off, and as each one crossed the threshold, their posture changed. Shoulders lowered, faces loosened. Relief, like travelers finishing a journey that had lasted far too long. I turned to the woman. You said people were waiting for evacuation trains. They were, she replied calmly. So what is this? Her expression softened, almost grateful. The train that finally came back. A chill prickled across my arms. Back from where? From the night the schedule broke. Behind her, the child paused at the doorway and looked up at me. You're not getting off? I asked before I could stop myself. The woman shook her head gently. Some of us couldn't leave, she said. Someone had to remain, so the route would be remembered. Eli swallowed hard. Remembered by who? She glanced toward the cab controls. By the next conductor. My stomach dropped. I'm the engineer, I said sharply. Freight only, no passenger authority. She studied me with quiet sympathy. That's what they all say. A flicker crossed the instrument panel. I followed her gaze and felt the blood drain from my face. Mounted beside the throttle where the manufacturer's plate should have been, sat a small brass tag. Tarnished, worn, engraved in careful lettering, C. Rourke, line engineer. Below it was a date, 20 years from now. That's not funny, Eli whispered. I didn't put that there. The woman stepped backward toward the open doorway. Every last train needs someone to guide it, she said. Outside, the final passengers disappeared into the fog, not toward buildings or streets, but simply fading, as if the town existed just beyond sight. Wait, I called. What happens when everyone gets off? She held my gaze. You learn the route. A sudden crackle burst from the radio. Walt's voice, loud with panic. Train 47, respond immediately. Your signal just reappeared, but you're not alone on that track anymore. The deep horn echoed through the mountains, low, distant, answering. Eli turned toward the sound, eyes wide. Caleb, there's another train out there. The woman gave a small, knowing smile. Yes, she said softly. There always is. The horn sounded again, closer this time, low enough that I felt it vibrate through the floor. Eli rushed to the windshield. There's no parallel track here, is there? There shouldn't be. Yet through the fog, a second beam of light appeared. Faint at first, then sharpening into the unmistakable glow of an approaching locomotive on our track, moving toward us. Dispatch, I barked. You said we weren't alone. Where is that train coming from? Papers shuffled faintly over the radio. There is no scheduled traffic within 100 miles, Walt said. Caleb, whatever you're seeing isn't in our system. The passengers were gone now. Only the smiling woman remained on the platform, her outline already thinning in the mist. Get the doors closed, Eli said urgently. I hit the master switch. Nothing. The panel stayed dark. The approaching light grew brighter, but something about it felt wrong. Too steady, too pale, like a headlamp shining underwater. Then I saw the locomotive behind it. Old, rounded nose, paint dulled to a color that might once have been blue. No company markings, no number. It rolled forward without sound except for that deep, endless horn. "Caleb," Eli whispered. "There's no engineer." The cab windows were empty, no movement inside. Yet the train continued toward us, slowing as it reached the platform, as if guided by an invisible hand. When it finally stopped opposite our engine, the fog shifted just enough for me to read the metal plate bolted to its side. "Evacuation Special." The letters were blackened, heat-warped. A memory surfaced. Training archives mentioning a relief train sent the night of the Belden fire, reported delayed, later listed as never arrived. The smiling woman stepped toward it. Before boarding, she looked back at me one last time. "You kept the schedule," she said gently. "Now they can leave." The doors of the old train opened with a slow, mechanical groan. Warm light spilled out, the first light that had felt truly alive since we stopped. She climbed aboard. The instant her foot crossed inside, our control panel flickered. Power surged back through the cab. The doors behind us slammed shut. Brake pressure restored. Throttle live beneath my hand. "Caleb!" Walt shouted through the radio. "Your systems just came back online. Move now!" I didn't hesitate. I pushed the throttle forward. Our train lurched ahead, steel screaming as we gathered speed. As we passed the other locomotive, I glanced sideways into its cab. For a split second, I thought I saw figures inside. Not moving, just watching forward, waiting for departure. Then the fog swallowed the entire train as if it had never existed. The GPS blinked, and the route line snapped back into place. Behind us, the track showed empty. No platform, no lights. Nothing. Eli exhaled shakily. "Tell me we're done with Belden Crossing?" I kept my eyes ahead, because up the line, barely visible before the fog closed again, stood another mile marker. 312. Eli stared at it. "That's not possible. We already passed it." A cold realization settled over me. The quiet stretch hadn't let us through. It had only turned us around. We crossed the marker again. 312. Same bent post, same peeling paint. But this time, the train didn't slow. It accelerated. "Caleb, ease it back," Eli said. "I'm trying." The throttle resisted my grip, humming beneath my palm like it had weight behind it. The speedometer climbed past 50, then 60. "I didn't push it that far." The radio crackled. "Train 47, you're over speed," Walt warned. "Reduce immediately." "I can't!" A sharp chime cut through the cab. Automated control engaged. Neither of us had triggered it. Ahead, the fog thinned just enough to reveal something new along the track. A small service lantern glowing beside the rails. And next to it stood a man. Railroad coat, heavy gloves, lantern held steady at his side. Waiting. As we thundered closer, he lifted his head. For a split second, the light struck his face. Eli sucked in a breath so hard it hurt to hear. "Caleb, that's you." The man had my build, my posture, even the same reflective strip across the chest. Older, though, hair gone gray, skin drawn tight with years. The train began slowing on its own. This time, I understood why. "No," I whispered. "No, keep moving." But the brakes sighed, and the locomotive rolled to a gentle stop beside him. The door behind us clicked open. Cold air crept in again. I didn't remember standing, but suddenly I was on my feet, walking toward it. Every instinct screamed to stay put, yet my body felt aligned with the motion, like stepping onto an escalator already carrying me down. "Caleb, don't," Eli said, grabbing my sleeve. The radio burst alive with Walt shouting my name, but their voices sounded far away, muted, like I was already leaving them behind. I stepped onto the ground. The older man studied me with tired, knowing eyes. "First time's the hardest," he said. My throat tightened. "How long?" He considered that. "Long enough to forget the life before the schedule." The lantern handle pressed into my palm before I realized he'd handed it over. Warm, familiar. Behind me, Eli shouted something, but the doors were already sealing. The engine roared. Train 47 pulled away with gathering speed. I watched it vanish into fog, carrying my voice, my radio, my way back. "You'll guide them through," the older version of me said quietly as he stepped past. "Until someone guides you." "Wait, where are you going?" He gave the faintest smile. "Home." Then the fog swallowed him. The lantern flickered once, steady in my grip. Far down the track, a horn echoed. Another train approaching. I lifted the light without being told how, and as its beam cut through the mist, a terrible certainty settled in. Mile marker 312 was never removed. It was reassigned. If you're ever riding the last train of the night, and it slows somewhere it shouldn't, don't look for the station. Don't watch the platform. And whatever you do, don't step off. Because some routes aren't printed on maps anymore. But the trains still remember them. And once they stop for you, you might be the one holding the lantern next. If this story kept you listening, make sure to subscribe to Campfire Horror Stories for more long-form horror set in remote places, forgotten jobs, and nights that refuse to end. Leave a like. It helps the channel reach more listeners who love atmospheric horror. And tell me in the comments, would you have stepped off the train or tried to stay aboard? Until next time, stay off the quiet routes.